This is E7 Motorsport, your favorite Chris Hay clone channel that just learned a video edit about an hour ago. Geared up and ready to go green. In this video I'll be presenting a comprehensive guide for both hot lapping and racing on Tiago Lima's rendition of the beautiful French endurance classic. In sim racing, this track could be somewhat intimidating to learn considering the high amount of time it takes to go around the track only once. Don't worry about that, I'm here to take you through it, and hopefully the first few times around the track will be painless for you. So let's start with just a general setup guideline. Obviously every single car has a proprietary setup. You can't really generalize most things, but I'll say what I think could apply to every single car that will run this track, with a GT bias. So first of all, I'd recommend increasing your tire pressures to prevent overheating in the first sector, in the last sector, and ultimately also to keep some of that heat onto the long straights. In the same train of thought, I've also recommend putting your rear toe to something pretty neutral to prevent the rears from heating up too much, because I've identified that as a problem child area of the entire setup. You obviously want a shallow rear wing not to produce too much drag on the straights, but at the same time you want to kind of keep planted in those high-speed turns like the Porsche curves, for example. While we're discussing aero, I'd also keep the front splitter pretty shallow. Going into a corner at 300 doesn't really leave you a lot of margin for errors. If you're hot lapping, keep those gears as long as possible, but obviously if you're in a race, maybe think about shortening them a bit, or else you're kind of going to look like an idiot off the line. And tied together would be a low ride height and softer suspension, which I believe on this track will allow you to extract the most out of the aero package without destabilizing the car too much. In real life, this track might be a bit bumpier, but in the sim it seems pretty stable. And finally, some general track tips that apply to GT cars instead of Corsa. Don't go over those curves that could be found throughout the Unadzia straights. You can ride them if you want to really get a bit more turn in the corners, but going over them generally destabilizes the car, so I wouldn't recommend that. Don't be afraid to cut some corners here and there. The track in Assetto Corsa seems to be pretty lenient, yet severe in some areas, so kind of experiment and find what line works best for you. Gentle steering inputs throughout S1 and S3. Well, as I was saying before, the rear tires tend to heat up a lot. If you want to keep those tire temperatures in check, be really gentle with your steering inputs because a bit of oversteer will really ruin your laps. And with any track, know which curbs to jump and which to avoid with a 10-foot pole. Anyways, enough blabbering and onto the corner-per-corner analysis. We start our track guide at the logical beginning of the track, the Dunlop curves. Now what to know with the Dunlop curves? Well, when it comes to corner cutting, always remember, if it's smooth enough to not trigger the in-game penalty system, yet also severe enough to piss off somebody in the comments section on Facebook of F1 Esports, you're doing it right. Now what I like to do in the Dunlop chicane is, on entry, when there's really starting to be a turn in, I like to release the gas and kind of coast it into the first turn, and slightly after the first billboard I slam the brakes, putting it into second gear. Importantly here, you don't really want to jump the curb on the entry of the first turn because it could really destabilize the car and you could end up going sideways into the braking zone. So either touch it, or even better, stay slightly away from it so that way you could have a nice smooth entry into the corner. The first part of the chicane I find is probably the easiest to cut. Yes, there are a bit of bumps in the terms of the sausage curb, but if you're really going for hot lapping and you want a good time on RSR, you can really turn in early there, stay in that second gear, and power through to keep all four wheels technically off the track. On the rightward part of the chicane, you might be tempted to turn in there and get the best run into the S's, but trust me, you don't really want to do that because going too hard on the sausage curb here actually impedes you. So you really want to be a bit smoother on entry here. In the clip I've pictured, I've gone a bit too much in my opinion. But you really want to go a bit more to the outside, stay legal, keep those two tires on the track to get the best run out onto the curbstone and give you the best straight line speed for the S's. And that now brings us to the second part of the track, the S's. So throughout the S's, what I like to do is to really keep those tire temperatures in check. I really avoid those strong steering inputs. Throughout the first rightward turn, I like to really keep it stuck to the right end of the track so you have the widest entry into the next curve without stressing your tires. Personally, slightly after I see those corner markers disappear from my view, I hit the brakes, I shift it down to third gear, and prepare for the next curve. In the left-hander, I also keep it as close as possible to the inside of the track to get the best run out before that small straight that's running up to Tête Rouge. Here, if you're hot lapping, you could really go into those bollards like if they weren't there. I mean, you could basically do that and there's not really any real consequence, there's no damage. All 4 wheels off the track technically. Obviously, if you're in a race, in a league, don't do this. But if you're hot lapping, you could get away with this, and not only will it help your exit by giving you a wider run out, but it will also calm your tire temperatures. The last corner before the Mulsanne, Tête Rouge. Okay, so honestly this one is really hard to get right, because you really don't see the apex. You can see my braking point, which is basically when the middle pane of glass in my 488 actually goes over the corner marker, and I'd say that's a good braking point even if you don't want to cut the corner too much and keep it clean for league racing. For hot lapping, however, you could go all the way out to the corner markers on the outside and not incur a penalty, and it might be faster as long as you avoid those sausage curbs on the exit. Now for the Mulsanne. Don't get distracted. As for the chicanes in the Mulsanne, we'll start with the first one. As soon as that yellow corner marker is gone from my vision, I actually slam the brakes and turn it in, put it into second gear. The first curb you could really go hard on without jumping, you could really take advantage of it to get a bit more turn-in. But the second one I prefer not touching at all, so you could get on the power pretty early. When it comes to the second one, there's traces on the ground that indicate brake marks, and I like to brake just a tiny bit before them, as you'll see in the video. Down into third, hit that inner curve, you could shift down into second, and notice that there's an inclination in this corner. So you might want to wait a bit before getting on the power because you will lose grip mid-turn. And if you sadly go a bit too far in this corner and hit the exit curve and clatter against it, you're going to lose a lot of time. So be patient, apply the throttle in a very gradual manner, and you'll be able to do a good exit. While exiting, do watch for that runoff though. If you go a bit too far, it might invalidate your lap, and the slipperiness of the runoff will make you lose time. Something to mention for both chicanes, there is a slippery runoff on the outside, and if you spend too much time on it and turn in or brake hard and lock your brakes on it, it will make you spin out, so make sure you're actually on the tarmac when turning into both corners. Now to the Mulsanne hairpin. So honestly, I don't really see a braking marker when I go into this corner, I just judge it by the distance I am from the curb. But as you can see here, there's a convenient lamppost that tells you exactly when you start to brake, so as soon as that disappears from my view, I slam the brakes. Don't hit the curb on the inside of the turn, that's very important, or else it's going to destabilize you and you're not going to get a very good braking out of it. If you want a bit more turn-in radius, you could go a bit onto that runoff. Be careful, because if you do turn and brake on it, you'll lose control, especially if you're hot lapping and you're confident. Go out there, send it onto the inside curve, don't jump it. The outside curve you could slightly jump, and that'll actually get you a bit of a better runoff into the straight. If you go a bit too far, you'll end up in the sandpit, so do be careful, but if you're hot lapping, you could take a bit of that extra room. On the straight exiting the Mulsanne hairpin, well, there's one thing you can't do, and that's hit the inside curves, or else you're gonna have a pretty bad time. So if you made it this far and you haven't been f***ed over by the circuit yet, congratulations. Or something like that. Anyway, Indianapolis. So what I like doing at Indianapolis is letting those 2 left wheels off the track into the runoff to get just a bit more corner entry, and then letting it drift towards the center of the corner. Missing that inside apex, missing that inside curbstone, and then hitting the brakes hard as soon as you clear the curbstone. And then sticking to the inside to try and take advantage of the space that there's in this curve. So here, just like at the second chicane in the Unazia straight, you have a bit of a level change. So it's pretty easy to accelerate a bit too early and kind of spin yourself out. You'll see me correcting often into this turn. The exit speed to Indianapolis doesn't really matter because Arnage is coming up right after. Arnage is pretty straightforward. I'd say look on your left, brake at the outside curbstone, send it in over the curbstone on the inside, and just let it coast to the outside. Do note that some of the surface on the outside of the turn is actually runoff. So if you go too far, not only could you invalidate your lap, but you also get a slippery exit which will actually make you lose time. Here, try and keep all 4 wheels on the track and it'll give you the least problems. Now thankfully we're at what I'd call the last big stint of the lap, which is the Porsche curves and the Corvette curves. So for the Porsche curves coming in, we see there's kind of a stain on the ground. What I like doing is at that stain, I brake as soon as I see I'm in the middle, and I shift it down to 4th gear. I'm not really at the top of the gear, I'm not at the bottom, I'm kind of in the middle, so I could use a bit of the torque to pull me through the corner. The first curve on the right side, I try not to touch. I try to stay as close to it possible, but don't touch it, because if you get on it from the grass, it'll throw you up. But the rest of the curves could be ridden. I wouldn't go over them, especially on the second right-hander. Going over the curve could actually destabilize you for the second left turn in the Porsche curves. All the curves after that braking you should take flat out until you get to the second right-hander. Now at the second right-hander, what I like doing is I get close to the lines delimiting the track and shift down back into fourth, let it drift a bit to the outside, bring it back in time for the last of the Porsche curves. Sometimes I do touch the grass, preferably don't do that because it could destabilize you. But on this last Porsche curve you have to really be careful. Once again, it's a corner with a weird banking. If there's any corners in the track that are really severe about track limits, it's this one. Going over with even 2 tires sometimes could give you an invalidation of your lap. If you're doing league racing and if you're not hot lapping, then be mindful of going over that track limit, because that could get you in trouble many times and it's hard to keep it clean. And last but not least, to finish our lap, the Ford chicanes. Brake at the small infield pit entry and shift down to third gear. Here in this corner, you don't want to go too far once again because there's those nasty sausage curbs, but put it in third gear and try and keep maximum 2 tires off the track. If you go all 4 tires though, I can't guarantee that's going to be legit even for hot lapping, because this is another corner where the righter part of the chicane seems to be really severe on corner cutting, but the leftmost part doesn't seem that much. And if you're hot lapping, the second Ford chicane you could completely disregard. You could basically just completely jump over it and it's going to be legit. The goal here is just to get a decent exit onto the pit straight, onto the curbstone on the left side, and to not end up in the sand trap. Then it's a short run up to the line. And that's a lap. Well, that brings us to the end of my first video ever. Honestly, it has been quite tedious, but it has been quite fun as well. I don't know what YouTube's going to reserve for me in the future, and I don't even know what my style is per se, but I feel like I'm even slowly discovering it just by making this video. So thank you for sticking around, and if possible, leave me a comment, tell me how could I make this better? What could I even improve upon? Also tell me, should I keep doing track guides, and if so, which track should I do next? And so to my competitors in tomorrow's race department GT3 sprint race, I bid you good luck. This has been E7, and by the time you watch this, I'll probably be passed out. And that's because I've been working on this for 14 hours.